Good evening, everyone. Great to be with you this evening via video. Wish I could be at each and every one of the life groups. Last night at my house, we had a leaders gathering for all the leaders of the life groups, and we had such a wonderful time. So many great testimonies of what God is doing through these amazing, really little, home churches, if you would, house churches. Just kind of from the bigger church. And we see that kind of modeled out in the book of Acts. It says there in Acts 2 at the end, verses 42 through 47. It's kind of the summary Luke gives of the early church, their practices, their activities in those first several years of the birth of the church. And we all probably know Acts 2:42. They continued steadfast in the apostles' doctrine, in fellowship, in the breaking of bread, and in prayer. And, as you go on, it kind of shows how they did that. And one of the things it says, of course, continuing in the apostles' doctrine, in fellowship, in the breaking of bread and prayers, all included in a life group. I mean, you guys do all of those things. And, he goes on to say that they met in the temple, and then they gathered and broke bread from house to house. It says, eating their food with gladness and simplicity of heart. And it goes on to say, and the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. The church is gathering together, studying the Word of God in the kind of the temple, if you would, the church, the bigger, assembly as we gather together, and then breaking it down into the homes, and really breaking not just down numbers wise, but breaking down the Word of God. And that's what we get to do here in the life groups, taking the message from Sunday and really working through that message and thinking through it, and not just hearing the Word and then not doing the Word. And so the life groups provide us the ability to do that. Of course, at this stage in your life group, as you're watching this video, you're going to move into that section. Of course, they provide the fellowship, the prayer, the encouragement, all of those other important things. And so we're so grateful for the life groups and for you guys to be devoted and committed to one. And just thinking through the message this week, as we finished out chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians, and we looked at just kind of laying down our rights for love's sake. That was the title of the message, the whole context there of that question that is asked by the church to the Apostle Paul. What about foods that are offered to idols, meats that are offered to idols? As a Christian, what about eating those? What's your counsel, Paul? How do we go about navigating that? Of course, culturally, we have a different situation where we don't, go to In-N-Out and ask the guy taking our money and our order, hey, by the way, was that meat back there sacrificed to idols? It's not a concept in our minds, but what Paul's point is laying down our rights. And we're going to see this in chapters 9 as we get into that on Sunday. Paul just basically there says, listen, we have the right to do these things, but we lay them down for the gospel's sake, so that we'd see men and women be saved. Of course, it's in chapter 9 where he says that I become all things to all men, that by all means I might win all, basically, is what he's saying. And so this is his heart and his passion. And this has got to be ours. So we're such in a Christ-centered, gospel-centered church, and it's so awesome to be a part of it. It's so missions-minded in the sense, and when I say missions, I don't just mean overseas missions. Of course, it includes that, but we are all on mission to bring the gospel to those that are around us. This is a purpose of our life. The purpose of the church is to be a witness of Jesus Christ. And so fulfilling that mission together will take times where we give up what is rightfully ours. We give it up for the sake of winning others. And so very excited for you guys to kind of think through that. We hit 3 main ideas under the idea of giving up your rights for love's sake in chapter 8. We saw there the right perspective was our first point, the first 3 verses, just having the right perspective. And then last week we looked at having the right knowledge, understanding who God is. And we'll focus tonight really on verse 6 because it was something we focused on in the message, and it's such a powerful verse. Just that understanding who God is, not religion, not jumping through a bunch of hoops, but who the sovereign living God is, all powerful, almighty, Redeemer, saved us, and we now have the power of the gospel to go forth in this life and to do what God's called us to do, not in just word, but in power. And Paul made that so clear. And so when we understand who God is, it helps us to navigate those gray areas that we talked about, those areas that are controversial, those areas where, I believe this, you believe that, but the Bible doesn't really talk about it. And how important it is that more than anything else, that we love one another. And then the last point we saw there, I think it was verses 9 through 13, that we looked at was, just having that, not only the as we saw, the right perspective and the right knowledge, but the right motive. What's your motive? We saw our motive must be ultimately to glorify God. That's got to be our motive. Motive has to be, and we looked at these 2 points under that section. Our motive has to be love. Not love for ourselves, but love for others. We looked at Romans chapter 14. You guys are going to spend a little time in your questions there tonight, thinking through it. Now, I just want to say this about Romans 14. Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 8 deal with the same concept. That is that we lay down our rights for love's sake. That what's more important isn't winning an argument or being right, but it's for love. They do deal with 2 different issues, though when you first read them, you think it's the same. One is dealing with the food dietary laws of the Jews. What day to worship on. What can we eat? What can we not eat? That's what Paul's talking about in Romans 14. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, of course, Paul's dealing in a pagan context, in a Gentile context, in an idol worshiping context. So, it is very different. And I think it's important for us to just understand that and to see that. And so just to break those 2 apart. But boy, there's just so much good stuff there for you to really chew on, to think through. And of course, in the culture we live now, where there is so much division, so many different ideas and opinions and all of those things. And so we just pray that you would just be filled with the Spirit of the Lord, and that you would just come into a relationship with Him, and just learn that our life isn't about us being happy, us being pleased, but it's about living our lives for God's glory. And when we do, we find that we are indeed happy and blessed. And so, Lord bless you guys. Hope you have an awesome, awesome discussion tonight.